Welcome to the Clean Power Hour Live. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Today is July 13th, 2023. Check out all of our content at cleanpowerhour.com. Please give us a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. That is how we grow the show and speed the energy transition. Check out our YouTube channel. You might be watching the live on YouTube. We also go live on Facebook and LinkedIn every Thursday at noon Eastern or 9 Pacific if you're on the West Coast. We have a wonderful show today. We have a special guest, Cesar Barbosa, and his colleague, Saxon Metzger, are here to talk about repowering and decommissioning solar facilities. Before I do that, I need our listeners to know a couple of things. We are funded by corporate sponsors, and we are hungry for more. So please reach out to me at tim@cleanpowerhour.com. I want to thank CPS America, Chint Power Systems, for being our major sponsor, and check them out at cpsamerica.com. And then Dinawatts Solar also, they are a performance analytics platform for utility solar, dinawatts.com. So thank you so much for our existing sponsors, but please do reach out to me. Looking forward to seeing all of you at RE Plus Vegas in September. So that's coming up fast, and really excited to go to Vegas. I want to introduce my co-host, John Weaver, before we introduce our special guest. Welcome to the show, John.
Hey Tim, thanks for that. I hope your solar days are going well. We're busy, can't keep up with it all. That's just the reality. And
Well,
I too will be in Vegas.
I can't have solar on my house because I have a ginormous maple tree in my yard that shades my roof. But I am so grateful every day for the shade that that tree provides, and all the other ecological services that that tree is providing my neighborhood. So anyway, technology is a wonderful thing, and we are here to geek out on the energy transition and this phenomenon of repowering and decommissioning power plants. I want to introduce Cesar Barbosa, who is the founder and CEO of NULife Power Systems. Good to see you.
Gentlemen, good to be back. Thank you for having us.
So, Cesar, we're going to introduce Saxon here in a second, your esteemed colleague, but why does NULife Power Services exist?
Tim, the story goes back to 2008 when I got into solar, and I'll keep the story very brief for the purposes of our audience here. It's kind of ironic. Now I'm decommissioning some of the safe systems that we were installing back in 08. I started my career here in California. We're still one of the more prominent states for solar deployment, and it's very interesting to be part of the maintaining, repowering, and decommissioning of some of these same systems that we were developing back in 08. I worked for a company, SunPower, for about 3 years, traveling the country, managing the retrofits, and I was having a hard time finding a contractor that could handle this in between of EPC and O&M work. And eventually I just said, well, if I can't find them, I'll be it. And so that was kind of the catalyst of starting NULife Power, and we've been certainly busy since then.
And when I think of repowering a solar facility, I think of tearing off the old modules and maybe the inverters and replacing them. But in our pre-show, we made a distinction between repowering and decommissioning. Lay that out for us, if you would, and then introduce your colleague Saxon for our audience.
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, I'll keep it in lane terms. So decommissioning is the process of removing the whole system back to its original state. In some cases, there's an opportunity to install a new system. In some cases, not immediately, or perhaps just not ever. The definition of repowering is replacing certain components to basically extend the lifetime of that system. And it can be from down to the bolts and nuts and the pillars of a ground mount to just replacing the inverter. So it's not a one and be all. Back in the day, we used to call this term retrofits, but now the buzzword repowering, which generally encompasses the full rehaul of the system, is more an appropriate term. And we can dive into those definitions a little bit more. Saxon Metzger is a very bright young man who I met through an article, a study he did for a city. Saxon is the yin to yang. He's the MBA with a long-term vision and sustainability. as most of the industry, I think, knows from me, I'm a more blue collar contractor, focus on the operations side of what we do. And I needed somebody to come in that really understood in depth what end of life and then the business metrics of what we were doing encompasses. So Saxon, if you want to do a quick intro, by all means.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. I started working with Cesar because I just felt inspired. My background with kind of my economics and MBA really was around how it just makes sense. For solar is just an incredible product for the environment and also economically. It's something that's a win-win for everyone. But it's a complicated industry and it's a very young industry. The technology hasn't been around for quite some time. And so what I saw in Cesar was someone who is really taking the initiative on the back end of an infant market and developing it in a way that is necessary. We need the services on the back end to make sure that we have the whole cycle of life, the solar kind of, cradle to grave, as it were. And that's something that we're doing here at NULife. It's really exciting.
And as John knows, it is one of the most common questions we get as developers is what happens to all the solar panels, at the end of life. People are very concerned about this is, electronics, right? And a lot of people are afraid that we're going to just completely overwhelm our landfills with used solar panels. And it's a legitimate concern because there are going to be billions and billions and billions of solar panels. And we still have a long way to go when it comes to repurposing solar panels and recycling them. And maybe we can get into some of the nuances of that. But John Weaver, what do you think are the three most important things that our audience would be keen to learn from Cesar and Saxon?
Number one is when they do a repowering, specifically, what's the logic? How does it work out? Does it make sense to repower? Can we make more money? Can we get more energy out of our roof? For instance, I have a customer who I installed a cylindra system on top of, and I've actually reached out to Cesar for advice on this system 6 months ago, a year ago. But we installed a cylindra system at the end of 2010. And it's still performing well. However, the customer is now asking to replace it. And the question is, do we want to replace it? Because he's like, hey, the new program has incentives. Maybe I should do that. However, we got a system that's running for 10, 12 years, and it's still running great. It's super close to its original output. Does the financial model, the cost of removing the system, cleaning up the roof, getting rid of all that conduit, getting down the copper, selling, and can you sell an inverter that's 600V or that's 480V but 600 volt modules from 12 years ago that's out of business? No, you're scrapping that thing. Can you sell those cylindra modules? Probably not. So when does it make sense to take down an old project and put up a new one? And that's a repowering question. When we move toward the decommissioning side, how much money can I get from my old gear? Will somebody cover all the cost of taking it down and getting my roof back to its original shape? And then the third one is what's going to happen with the old gear. And I guess we're already talking about that, recycling, reusing. And I guess Cesar has already told us before, maybe Saxon does the spreadsheets on it, but how do you, if I'm a business owner who has a 300 kW system on my roof, how are you going to do something about that? What kind of money are you going to give me? Show me. How's it going to work? Who's going to pick it up? Where am I going to sell it? Where are these modules going? So repowering, is it financially viable? Decommissioning, am I going to get some money back? What's it going to cost me to do all this stuff? Somewhere within there is what I've experienced in my limited, Cesar's been installing in California. You're in the grandfather portion of the nation. We're in the Northeast, and our cutting edge systems are 2008, 2010. So we're just starting to see it, but not from a technical standpoint, from a financial standpoint is what repowering conversations are. And that's a nuance for me, and it's hard. And I'm even good at spreadsheets. How do I figure that out? And, I reached out to a guy in Southern Cali to help me in the Northeast Massachusetts, in the Northeast portion of the country, to learn about it, because it's a new art. It's a new science that's developing.
Yeah. Well, I think to answer your one of the last questions that you had around, what happens to the modules, that's a big concern. And, I've actually been doing presentations with, kids, to try and kind of help speed the energy transition, working with different elementary schools and things like that. And one of the things that in a recent presentation, I kind of laid out was new modules. Basically, about 40% of all new module demand could be satisfied by just recycling the stuff that is being decommissioned on an ongoing basis. All of the technology for recycling has been, crammed maybe in the last 5 years of trying to make it happen. But now almost every major recycler in the United States has their own either patented or soon to be patented, I think is really the closer definition of it, for solar recyclers, automatic, and they'll run them through in the same way that they do TVs, things like that. It's just an industry that it's happening. It makes sense. And you can harvest, I believe, 98% of the material from a solar panel. There's very small amounts of it that are not recyclable. And a lot of the materials in that panel are the exact same things that we are needing to have in terms of national security concerns, energy transition concerns, all that things. So it's perfect as a model for being able to utilize all this stuff coming off of roofs. So in the back end, that's something you can always tell folks who are concerned about solar. Look, there is a entire completed life cycle here that we've figured out how to make this thing sustainable around the clock. In terms of, when you look at repowering, decommissioning, one of the things that we do as a company is many times we'll offer folks our options here. Hey, you have a system, it's not really performing that well. Let's say it's not even on. You might not even know why. You just say, hey, it hasn't really worked for a couple of years. We bought this building, maybe even it's not even ours. Can you just come out and figure it out, fix it up? And we'll say, hey, here's the 3 things that are wrong. The inverters aren't good anymore. The trackers aren't functioning well. The modules are underperforming, but they still kind of function. And at that point, when you run the math on that kind of a project, and then you run the math on what happens if we just take it all out and put a brand new system in, it's incredibly complicated. And it's kind of like when people ask for a new system, well, how much does solar cost? And I think anyone who sold solar, and I was a project developer for a couple of years, you can say, well, anywhere from 10,000 to millions, depending on how big we're talking, what kind of location, what kind of efficiency, what are your bills? There's so many factors. But a lot of the costs associated with this is just labor at scale. If we're going to be honest, you start looking at modules, that has a cost, but it's even the cost of who is picking up that panel, locking in that panel, who is looking for the issues in those panels. That is something that's really important. And, we're needing about another 1 million folks in the solar renewable field working on this stuff. So it costs quite a bit. So the very simple answer is it's a case-by-case basis. How many years are you going to get out of a new set of inverters if the panels are already bad or they're nearing being bad? Is it worth spending that much money to get 2 more years? It's hard to tell, and it's easy to tell when we have the experience and we can lay out the models. And I think that's the thing that we as a company do. Here's some 30-year cash flow analysis. If you want to do this, if you want to do that, you can compare them. We can give you the expertise. And like with a lot of stuff, when you deal with old legacy systems, how can we guarantee that the rest of the system isn't going to fall apart a year after we replace the functioning parts that are the worst off? It's hard to tell.
I totally agree. And I'll piggyback quickly on what Saxon is saying. I give folks the old political answer, and I gave you, John, the same answer. It really depends. It's so hard to price out a repowering or even a decommissioning project on a cents per watt metric. We really need to dive into the system components and figure that out. I'll explain this part, and I think this will help. Just kind of going back to the definitions. There's 3 things that we can do with the module. Okay, one is recycle it. The second is repurpose, and the third one is basically reuse. And so what that means, recycling means that we're actually destroying the module. It's going through a facility, like Saxon was mentioning, and we're covering those raw materials. And to your point, Tim, of like the dark side of the renewable energy, I'm not as pessimistic. I'm actually pretty excited because with great challenges come great opportunities. Saxon and I and our company are part of some policy associations. We're working with SEIA and CAUSA on moving policy here in California, and hopefully we can adopt that nationwide on considerations of PV end of life. The second part of what we can do with these modules is repurpose them, which means that we're basically helping the owner find an off-taker, a buyer. In many cases, they're going to developing countries around the world. A lot of these modules that are 10, 15 years old, a bit degraded, but still have half of their lifespan left. And so we're seeing massive amount of demand in being able to ship these components to different countries. Now, of course, we need to be responsible with that and making sure that we're not sending our garbage to another country that can't sustain that technology. So I'm not as I'm actually optimistic on what this opportunity.
How do you? I mean, let's get into some examples, if we could, of projects that you guys have worked on, and how do you know what happens to those repurposed panels?
Oh, we track them. I mean, it's listen, a lot of these large asset owners that we're dealing with, they're pretty liquid tied to their contracts. They need to see where they're going. I mean, eventually, once they reach the developing country, it's hard to track it all the way to its installation. But I don't think that, as an industry, we need to be concerned with that part of it. As long as the module is safe to be reused, that's all we can ask for right now. It's a lot better to reuse a panel that's got 10 years left on it than to go to a costly process of having it recycled or worse, landfilled. So we can do our best to track it, but eventually, whether they land on an RV or on a some kind of a hybrid system here in the state or a developing country, it's quite hard to track it all the way there.
They do have serial numbers that they'll track even with recycling, just to confirm that sometimes when you drop them off at a recycling facility, they'll say, well, actually, we went through and we were able to fix up a couple of these. And so then they have the report that's automatically generated and forwarded, which has been very helpful for us to show to clients, you're maintaining your obligations for, climate emissions, whatever it might be.
That's exactly right. Yeah. As far as like Saxon said, just to reiterate, when we have to recycle the module, and the reason we recycle the module is because either it has some kind of a class defect, or just a brown discoloration, delamination, broken, or just such a low wattage that isn't feasible to transport, then the recycling centers have to provide a certificate of destruction, and we provide that to the system owner to basically identify them from any kind of liability.
So let's walk through the life of a project for you guys, though. Let's say I'm a system owner. It's 15 years old. I'm dissatisfied with the production I'm getting out of it, or the amount of O&M I'm having to do on it to keep it running. I hire NULife. Walk us through what that looks like, and then the decision tree and how owners will decide, okay, I'm going to tear off the panels, but the racking's good and I can install new panels and get a new system.
Yeah. So a lot of times, I mean, it's a really simple process for us. I mean, but between the as-built, any kind of changes to that, usually a site walk, conversations with the owner to kind of gauge where they're coming from. I think a lot of times that's a really important metric is, what is the interests? What is the kind of engagement with the project? Do you know a lot about it and you're really invested? Is it a key part of your strategy, having solar on your building? Very different conversation than someone who said, I just bought this warehouse. I don't want the headache. What's going on here? And so we very much want to respect where folks are coming from and give them the options. So between, reviewing the data sets that we have from the project, reviewing any kind of monitoring data that they might have, the as-built, and then doing a site walk ourselves, we'll be able to see what the options are. And at that point, we have an incredibly detailed level of calculating. Basically, we have an end-of-life calculator that we've been able to put together even based on that experience to say, this is approximately what it's going to cost. And then eventually we'll get to, here's the hard specifics. This is exactly what we're contracting for. And when we're doing that process of research and plugging in those numbers, as we start to see the numbers go up this way or down that way, we'll start to say, okay, now we got to be prepared to what are the other options here. So if the asset owner says, this is what we want, we'll make sure to pursue that to give them that price. in that reality, but then also offer the alternatives that we see on the site that makes sense. So we've shown up to ground mounts that haven't been functioning super well. They had some questions about trackers. And then we also said, just so you know, we can't guarantee based on what we've seen for the rest of the site with these modules, with these inverters, it potentially you're looking at a system that you're going to have to do something like this every couple of years until it's no longer functional. We can't guarantee that. We don't know, but based on our experience, decommissioning is something that might be a very viable option. Right now, while the panels have some efficiency left in them, maybe there's a resale value that there wouldn't be in another 5 or 6 years. And then we just go through the process of costing that out based on our experience as well. So you don't really know until you show up to a site and you have all that information, kind of a review of what your options are going to be. But then when you do, it's just a simple matter of just plugging in the numbers for each one of them and determining, what are the options.
It's interesting. You, Cesar, again, you worked for SunPower back in the day, one of the original big companies. So you start off with experience there. Then you move into experience with O&M. Then you move into experience with decommissioning. That's the most logical path I could think of. First, you build it. You're like, oh, I know how to build it. Then you fix it. You're like, oh, I know where everything breaks. Then you take it apart. Yet still, you guys find it challenging, hard work, and a lot of detail oriented. This sounds like this is a new science that's going to have more nuances and more layers and more complexity coming than we get just yet. I'm wondering, most of your work so far is focused on rooftop and maybe carports, or, between these different systems, where do you see the nuances, the challenges, the differences that confuse you guys? Because, you're among the people with your experience of being able to do this specific new job the best. You built it, you've seen it break, you've probably had your guys on site that break something, because we all do, that's how it works, because we're human beings, and you're like, oh, I broke that, here's how I fix it, sweet. And now you're decommissioning and sometimes putting it back together. This, again, you guys are close to the perfect group to be doing it. Which pieces are the hardest, the most challenging, the most just, which ones just piss you off when you're on site, Cesar, trying to do your work, and you're like, now I got to deal with it? Because you only show the pretty pictures on LinkedIn. You show when you stack everything wonderfully, you have your machines, your inverters on the pallets, you can see the dirty roof that's underneath everything, but you never show yourself like yelling at a roof. What's a thing where you're yelling at a roof when you're doing this type of job that catches you, surprises you type of thing?
Yeah, well, let's talk about decommissioning. I love that question, John. Let's talk about decommissioning. Rooftops are our bread and butter, by all means, certainly. We've decommissioned full carports down to the pillar, having to bring in a hydraulic jackhammer and take out the pillars. So we've done it all. Pretty straightforward. I think the biggest kind of pain in the butt right now are the ground mounts, because I think there's still a general emphasis on thinking that we can nuke the site. Right. I mean, at the end of the day, it is construction. Like at the end of the day, it's installation in reverse. So let me ask you, what's the best way to remove 1,000 driven posts in the ground?
Well, first, call you. Second, get some really strong piece of machinery, drill into the pile and pull it up, or grab the pile and pull it up. I mean, these are things we literally pounded them into the ground. So I have no idea. It's just some
They
sort
don't
of thing
make a machine for that, Cesar. They make a machine to put it in the ground. They don't make a machine to pull it out.
That's my point, Tim. Like the machine is here and here, right? And then the segue question to that is, how do you put a price unit to that post? And so I think one of the frustrations and confusions that I still see with even experienced developers is that they still think that they get a net positive cash for the decommissioning of that system. They think that it's either going to be a net
or neutral.
They
hope it's cash neutral, right? That you can sell the copper and aluminum and steel and glass for what it's going to cost to decommission. That's the general business model that I've seen.
Well, and I think the question
And
that
I'm going to
sometimes
say, and I'm going to
the question I think is sometimes interesting to ask is like, so if someone said, hey, you can have all the stainless, all the steel that you want from this site, thousands and thousands of pounds, but you have to be the one that figures out how to get it all out of the ground. Would someone do that for free just because they were so excited to get that scrap metal? I wouldn't be signing up to clear my Saturdays to make some side money on that one. I think that would be some pretty challenging kind of financial metrics on that. And then who knows how to do it? That's the other question too, is like, who knows how to do it, and who knows how to do it enough that they've made the mistakes to learn to improve the business model, cost it appropriately. And, we encounter a lot of folks who want to try some of this, or they'll feel like they can do this to stretch into it. And we've been really grateful. And we, for you to call us, the best or the most perfect people to do it, I'm, honored to just be able to just make our attempts to do it. And I think that, that's some really hard-won lessons there. And that's part of the energy transition that I don't think that they talk about as often is, I think it was so hard to get solar acceptable in the day. For 25 years, we've been fighting to get solar just put in the ground, and it's still in some places a regulatory fight. And now I think people are waking up to the fact that you put in these systems, not really thinking about having to remove them because they'll all just last for forever. But 25 years passes, unfortunately, a little bit too quickly. I think for all of us, I think we'd all prefer another 25 years or that time to have slowed down a little bit. So were people thinking about interoperability of inverters, wiring, panels back in the day? We've had situations with racking where, man, we'd love to give you this perfectly good racking, leave it there, and we'll just replace the module. But no modules are the right thickness. No modules are the right dimensions for us to be able to just plug and play. No one thought about plug and play back in the day. Or if they did, it wasn't something that people really put emphasis and time on. And I think that is what really complicates a lot of this stuff that we deal with on sites. And that's the thing I think is the most annoying when you ask about what's the worst thing that you see. I hate to see the inefficiency. The moment where you're like, God, two inches here versus 1.6 inches is all that's stopping this project from being a walk in the park.
But so in our last couple minutes together, what is the end user's experience? Are they feeling a gotcha about owning an old solar array, or is there hope here that there is going to be a second life for their project and it's going to turn into long-term savings?
I'm me, Tim. I'm the optimistic fella, right? I'm so entrenched in this industry that I have to always bring in the positive end of the coin. I would say, honestly, though, it's a little of both. Keep this in mind. When we're talking about decommissioning, it is a sticker shock. There's no question about it. I don't think a lot of us were assuming those costs, and they're in the six figures, regardless of what you're looking at. I think nowadays, you're lucky if the module has ability to be repurposed, and then we can offset the cost of that construction process. When we're talking about repowering, there is a considerable option to bring in energy storage, which I think is going to be the more promising aspect of repowering, because when you can couple energy storage into a repowering project, you leverage a lot of those new ITCs. You leverage the fact that we're already mobilized on site. So I think that's going to be a big kicker as we continue down this journey of repowering.
Especially with NEM 3.0 in California, right?
Yeah. Well, and to really answer your question too, is a lot of these times, if you had a commercial solar site that's been around for 15 years, most likely it's paid itself off. You might be really frustrated about a sticker shock here. If the site is already viable for new solar and you can get some of the new benefits, I think it's kind of a road bump, speed bump in the process. And it's something that we should work on as an industry and messaging and being clear now that we know more, we should say more, we should do better. But at the same time, solar has this infinite promise, and the numbers look great no matter how you pencil it out. And it's just looking better every year with the technology changing.
And one parting question, today the vast majority of your work is in California. What are the next, 2 or 3 markets that you see maturing? Hawaii?
I think New Jersey has a lot of those existing. I coming from a background of sun power. A lot of those power line systems were deployed in New Jersey, Massachusetts. Sometimes it's not just a matter of how old the system is. It can also be, one of the folks here in the comments talked about tornadoes, and acts of God. I think we're going to see this opportunity and challenge across all states, but mostly the grandfather states, I think, are going to be obviously the bigger states with this opportunity.
All right, we're going to say goodbye to you guys. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Cesar Barbosa and Saxon Metzger with NULife Power. Thanks so much.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Take care. All right. What do you think, John? Your camera's struggling to see you there, but
thanks, guys.
I don't know if that's a signal issue or computer issue. We're going to move on to the news.
Yeah, I hear the weird stuff going on in the back.
John Weaver has a weak signal, but we're going to move on to the news. Before I do that, I want our listeners to know that we are doing a listener survey, and I'm going to put this on screen. Week in, week out, we're bringing you a pre-recorded interview on Tuesdays, and then this live that we do every Thursday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Go to bit.ly/CPH survey 23, bit.ly/CPH survey 23 to take our listener survey. And when you complete the survey, we will send you a Clean Power Hour hat. So thank you for being a listener and considering to take our survey. Really appreciate that. We want to gather information about what you're interested in, what are the topics and the companies, the technologies that you'd like to see us covering here on the Clean Power Hour. Looks like we're getting John back in the feed. Are you there, John?
I'm in MIT area, literally. Yeah, I'm in the MIT region. I should have some of the fastest internet on Earth around here, but
it's shared by millions and millions.
Flaky.
The problem is the Wi-Fi, John.
Everybody.
The problem is not being on a wired connection. Honestly, that's probably the problem. But
I don't even have a wired connection on my laptop these days.
Yeah, you have to get a dongle that has a USB-C. They do exist. But anyway, let's talk about that funky Onyx solar site that you found on Twitter. It looks like distressed steel. I love that look on this facade. And I could learn how to drive StreamYard. I might be able to get it on screen.
As you're bringing it on site, and the fact that we're now looking at a weird solar panel is the last question I wanted to ask those folks was, what do they think about all of these strange module sizes that are now popping up, and how's that going to affect the repurposing? And they did reference it when they were talking about the inefficiency of sites where you have a 2-inch versus a 1.6 inch. And as we look at this module, which is beautiful, you look at the images that come along with this module from Onyx, it's like, wow, what a great product. But this product is custom built for a specific building. Oh, look at that. I mean, that's a building. That's the fact that it generates solar is pure 100% bonus.
But it's a lovely thing. If you're an architect now, you can do anything with a solar panel, right? This is phenomenal, and the efficiencies are higher than you might think. I think they're in the 20s, aren't they? Or no, teens? not 20s, but teens.
No. Teens, 16%. They said 16%, 160 watts per square meter. So that's efficient. That's 16% efficiency for this
Yeah.
product, which
Yeah.
is not bad. You know,
And
whole bunch of products, whole bunch of utility scale facilities were made at 16% efficiency.
All right, we're going to talk about the wind industry on the East Coast. We've been reporting on the ramp up of offshore wind on the East Coast of the U.S. You found a story in Electric. In a U.S. first, fossil fuel power plant workers will be retrained for offshore wind. Talk about the energy transition, right? This is also a labor force transition that we are making, and we need to make it a just transition so that our labor force is not left out of a job. But all right, that's on screen now.
I'm conscious of this power. Yeah. So first off, this is the Ravenwood generating station that these union workers came from, and so that's a facility that's downtown New York City, and you know it's a fossil facility that is set among 20 million people who work downtown in New York City, and it's outputting pollution and CO2 and everything. And you know it's a big plant, 2.5 gigs in Queens, so Long Island, Queens. And the the challenge of, you know, the politics of renewables is money. I mean, that's fundamentally, we've made massive amounts of money as a species and as special interests selling coal, selling gas, selling oil, and still selling it. And it's people are still going to be rich off of it for the next 20 years. And how do you transition? Well, one way to transition humans is through material goods and saying, listen, you can have a house that's just as big, you can have a car that's just as big, you can have all the things you want. That's one path. And this is a path where union workers who have guaranteed wages, who are going to make good money, are moving from a fossil facility straight to a wind facility. And this is, you know, I try, whatever. I'm not going to lie about wanting to get into politics, but a new term that's floating around there is called Bidenomics, and this is being pushed by the Democrats right now because we're seeing jobs from manufacturing facilities all over the Southeast United States and Midwest United States, from Kansas across to North and South Carolina, south into Georgia, all the way across back to Texas. We're seeing solar panel factories, car factories, battery factories, all these various factories. And for the first time, my company has quoted a prevailing wage project. So now we're reaching out to union electricians for all of our projects above 1 megawatt AC. And now we're reaching out and we're telling our mechanical people to increase their wage rate because they need to be prevailing wage now. And these are two different sets of crews. And now, because of the IRA, we're seeing an opportunity for wages for the every person, the common person, that are solid. And this is going to be a path toward the transition. When we have people who are doing good jobs, that make good money, that wake up, go out, do some work, come home, play with their kids, say hello to their family. This is a chunk, a very important chunk of the energy transition. So I thought it was kind of cool. Now, the headline's a bit of a misnomer. It says the first people to leave the fossils. You know, you would think this is the first fossil fuel employee. It's not. There's tons and tons and tons of people that are in the fossils, that were in the fossils that are now in renewables. But it's a good headline in that we see a very clear opportunity for some very clear power plant union workers from a fossil facility that are explicitly shifting to a wind facility. And it's in New York City, and it's great. If the New York City union folks are making a move, the nation's going to follow, and it's cool. So that's why I jumped on. I was like, ooh, look at that, union guys.
Yeah, it's kind of like as California and New York go, so will the rest of the country. And I mean, we report pretty regularly on power plants that are being shut down and repurposed in some way for the clean energy transition. It's a growing drumbeat, and it's a huge economic opportunity for the United States. And frankly, these power plants are going to get shut down one way or another. So it's it's only fair that the powers that be really make an effort to help those workers transition. Let's keep moving though, John. We only have 15 minutes left. A little abbreviated news show. It was great to see Cesar again and meet Saxon. But so be selective about the ranking here. You've got
I'm ranking as we speak. I'm ranking as we speak, Tim. I'm
you got
doing
a
the
story
work.
about Texas. The Southwest is in a heat wave, and the Northeast is in a major flood. The weather is getting very weird in the United States. It's not just the United States. It's, of course, a global phenomenon. But what is the story here from Clayton Meeker? Here we go again, he says.
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted to show this off again because if you zoom in a little bit, this is so there's where he's selling electricity from his battery and from his rooftop solar project. And we talked about this maybe last week or the week before. But at some point, yet again, the Meeker house is making $5 per kilowatt hour. There it is.
Yeah.
$5 per kilowatt hour, Timothy. That's he's a peaker plant. He is literally a peaker plant. Peaker plants run, and they're financially viable. They run for 10% of the year, 5% of the year. And now Texas via Tesla has it. And again, we talked about it last week. We shouldn't stick on it too long, but it's happening again. And so what I wanted to point out is that if a power wave exists, or a heat wave exists, and there's stress on the grid due to the heat wave, then we have opportunities with our homes. And I just wanted to show it off again because it's happened twice now. And it's probably going to happen 2 or 3 more times. And I was actually having a conversation about this event, plus with a customer in Rhode Island about getting into the Connected Solutions program where he rents out his battery to the utility. And showing him how and say, listen, here's an example of it. So this is connected to the VPP stuff of the world, the virtual power plants. This connects to how many gigawatt hours, no, let me rephrase that, terawatt hours we're eventually going to have rolling around on our roads. I think I saw a headline recently that broke down the total number of Teslas that were in the world. I multiplied it by 75 kilowatt hours, and we're at like almost 400 gigawatt hours, about 375 gigawatt hours. And and look at that. So Brian, check this out. Meeting with Octopus Energy to enroll in a VPP this afternoon. I know Octopus is a energy company that's based in the UK. To the best of my knowledge, they might be elsewhere, but that's what's happening. People are literally signing up for VPPs to make their house a part of the power grid. And this is going to become fundamental. And I've been talking about the value of distributed energy for a long time. Last week, we showed a gas power plant in New England that was shut down, and the New England grid operators, NEISO, specifically stated behind the meter solar, which nobody could have expected, BS, sorry, Tim, behind the meter solar led to this gas peaker plant shutting down. Man, that's pretty cool. We knew batteries and solar were coming for it. We didn't know it was going to be your batteries, Tim, or my batteries, or your solar. Well, not your solar because you got beautiful trees over your house, but we knew it was coming. What we didn't realize that it was us, you and I, and Brian, and Brian's doing the Octopus Energy in Texas, so smart. So it's Brian and Christopher who are coming for these peaker plants with the garage.
Octopus is a very interesting company. They have disrupted the utility model in the UK, and they're now coming to the US. So I look forward to seeing how they do that, and we would love to get Octopus on the show. I happened to meet one of the Octopus executives who's got a new startup. So anyway, Octopus is not a household name today in the energy industry, but it will be tomorrow, I think. So thanks for being here, Brian. Really appreciate you being on the show. Do you want to talk about you really want to talk about the quantum computer that is going to destroy our future, John?
Well, I mean, we do talk about rocket ships, and we do talk about related crazy tech, and that's just one that first off, look at that picture. Come on, that's a human brain right there we're building, Tim. That's going into the robots. That's going into the robots that either A, will take over the planet, or B, will be our brethren and something. I don't know. I really, if we're talking to Clean Power Hour, I know clean energy, but this is a next stage thing for humanity.
I mean,
and this is
of course, AI and supercomputers, and in this case, quantum computers, can be leveraged for the clean energy transition. And I'm dying to ask that a really smart, narrow AI, hey, computer, what is the most efficient way to get from where we are today, a 20% clean grid to a 100% clean grid? And what are the, policy changes? How do we need to evolve our ISO structure? How we have designed our grid and our utilities and the regulatory system is clearly pretty dysfunctional. It was good 100 years ago, but it's no longer good for the modern era. We have better technology and we need to move fast. So anyway, I'm not opposed to it. It's just also has a scary dark side when you start thinking AGI, and this machine here that we're looking at will probably feed that AGI. Anything else you want to say about the Google supercomputer?
I, for one, look forward to my robot overlords that are going to be literally in my pocket at some point in the future. And I don't know. Human evolution and evolving within the universe is a really interesting topic for a different podcast that you and I don't host. But I do totally think it's really cool. And Tim, we're using AI to some degree. Well, I put the Norwegian phosphate deposit just because I like you, Tim. But we're using AI already in our tools. Not AI, but machine learning, because a helioscope is a machine, is a tool. Microsoft
sure.
Excel is a tool. AutoCAD is a tool. So we're already like inching on this. The question is, how's it going to go? I think there's a really awesome piece of software out there that my company hasn't been able to use yet. I think it's called PV Case. And what they'll do is you'll drop in your design, and then they'll pump and a bunch of variables, and they'll pump out like 1,000 versions of your design and say, this one is the best one. And that's like, it's not AI, it's not a thinking thing, but it's really close to thinking. I mean, it's just thinking fast and in a different way. And so I'd love the machine that does the answers you have, Tim. We have modelers like Jesse Jenkins and groups who try to do these least cost things. It's really cool to watch. And they're borderline AI tools. They're machine learning, they're math, they're complex.
I'm all for
calculations.
narrow AI is good. AGI, artificial general intelligence, is mightily scary. So let's move on. We're going to talk about Norwegian phosphate rocks. I know it doesn't sound too sexy, but apparently there's been a find. This is from TechSpot. Massive Norwegian phosphate rock deposit can meet fertilizer, solar, and EV battery demand for 50 years. Who knew? And that photo there, I mean, that does seem quintessentially Norway. Norway is a very mountainous and rocky place. But what's the story here, and why is that relevant to the clean energy transition, John?
So it's cool because phosphate is used in modules in a minimal manner from everything I've read. So it was really a stretch to say that this is a solar important thing, because from what I've read, it's only a doping thing where we add phosphates to the somewhere in the super fine amount. So it's not a huge amount. And it's also in EVs. But what I really liked about this, also, we need to throw some salt on these headlines. From what I've read, this deposit is really deep and really hard to get to. And it's in a format that's very not dense. So there's apparently the best deposit of this materials in Morocco currently, and it's like sitting near the surface, and it's just a big wad that they can easy-ish work through. So this hasn't necessarily won the world, but what it does do, it reminds me to tell everybody, hey, the world was told that we would run out of oil in the 70s, and we were wrong. The world was told that we were going to hit peak oil availability in the 90s, and we were wrong. We were told we were going to hit peak again recently, and we were wrong. What this tells me is that, reminds me of that statement. The Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of rocks. The oil age isn't going to end because we're running out of coal, gas, and oil. The technology age that we're moving into of new energy, I have a feeling that resource challenges won't be in the form of volume. We're going to have plenty of copper. We're going to have plenty of silicon. We're going to have plenty of lithium. It's just going to take our time to get there and dig into the earth and find it when we're financially motivated to do so. And every once in a while, we're going to find something like this, and we're going to be like, we were wrong again. In fact, we're wrong all the time. Let's accept it. And let's just lean forward and push, because one layer, we have no choice. But another layer is that we know that these things are down there. We just have to work and find them.
That I don't know if you know the answer to this, but that graphic in the story, which shows the location of this particular find and several others, says it's going to supply CRMs to Europe. What are CRMs? Something resource materials. I don't know.
Critical resource materials.
Yeah, maybe.
Sounds critical.
All right. Well, we're winding down. Got a couple minutes left. What one or two stories should we get to?
All right. I got two that are super focused. First, let's talk about. Actually, I got three because I'm gonna try and sneak a third one in there because we do that.
I have a hard stop. So.
All right. We'll go fast. California. Recently, they broke a record for their battery output at 4.3 gigawatts of capacity. That was the peak output from their batteries. Saw a document yesterday that they're over 5.6 gigawatts, maybe gaining on 5.8 gigawatts of capacity deployed, which means they're getting close to 23, 24 gigawatt hours. And then by September, August, I think they're scheduled to have somewhere in the 7 to 8 gigawatts of capacity. This is the largest energy storage market on Earth, and it's growing. And this is only utility scale. Brian, he signed up for Octopus Energy, and they're doing a VPP. Tesla's doing the same thing in California, and that's a multi-gigawatt distributed network. Now, multi-hundred megawatt. It's not gigawatt yet, the distributed VPP network. But we're putting out massive numbers of batteries, and that chart there is going to grow real fast a couple more times before the end of this year. And I think, I don't want to, California is going to prove to us that batteries can back up the grid in a massive amount and can do these things we want them to do, especially in the evening peak period from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m., 4:30 to 10. That's going to hit starting right around now and go all the way through September for California. And I'm going to make a prediction that we will see significantly lesser headlines about California's grid stress this year than we have seen about Texas's grid stress this year. And I think the number one reason we'll see fewer headlines is this chart right here. This chart showing us that we have 5 gigawatts of instantaneously available energy storage to pump juice into the grid, and not just into the grid, but strategically around the grid, because batteries can be distributed very easily. Batteries are dispatchable up to the point with their capacity. And so we can, just imagine this, this machine with lots of little pieces and lots of little pressure points where things stop. And then all over you have little spots going instantaneously shooting out small amounts of energy, smoothing the flow. And it's all computerized. It's going to keep getting distributed. We're going to keep having, we're going to start to, I don't know, maybe we'll see this weird microgrid situation start to develop. I'm not certain, but this is big. This is a huge thing, and we're all watching it, and let's keep watching it. The batteries are going to roll. They're going to roll hard and fast. So, all right, Next one.
Well, We're going to talk about the Clean Power Media Network because,
All right.
This storage business is very important. And, while we are building a network called the Clean Power Media Network, cleanpower.media, check it out. And we have some wonderful podcasts here, including Sean White's Solar and Storage podcast. Sean White is a master NABCEP trainer. Anyone in PV knows Sean White's name. We have PKD, Peter Kelly Detweiler. He does a wonderful news roundup every Tuesday. You can check that out on YouTube or here at cleanpower.media. And then some young guns in the industry, James McWalter with his company Paces, the Paces podcast, otherwise known as Build Repeat, where he interviews just a slew of other early stage entrepreneurs. And James is disrupting the software as a service for solar developers and land acquisition and site acquisitions. So check him out if you're a solar developer or wind developer. And then Nate Kirchhoffer and Beyond Lithium. We want to get more shows about storage on the Clean Power Media Network. I would love to have a show dedicated to virtual power plants, to long duration storage. I was on a panel yesterday for Reuters talking about grid scale storage in the US, and they have an event coming up in November in Houston dedicated to that topic. It's a very exciting time in storage. It's like we're in, we are where we were in 2010 in solar right now in storage. It's a heyday. It's going to be very rapid growth and lots of innovation. And it's not a matter of one technology or another dominating the scene. It's going to be many technologies. So I'll just put that out there to our listeners. Please introduce me to the shows or the future shows. We will produce somebody's show for them. If you're a lithium battery storage, any kind of energy storage geek, please reach out to us. We'd love to create a show with you. And with that, John, we should talk about how our listeners can find the Commercial Solar Guy.
commercialsolarguy.com, contact us page, LinkedIn, John Fitzgerald Weaver, and Twitter, Solar in Mass. Those are all the places I can be found.
Excellent. And why would somebody want to find the Commercial Solar Guy, John?
Because we can consult and teach you. We can build your project, and we could develop your project. We have engineers, we have finance, we have sales, we have contractors. We're a general contractor. We've been in solar for over 15 years now, so we know some things. We can help you know some things.
I was going to say, besides giving me nightmares about supercomputers that are going to drive the AGI, but and then
what about you?
You can find all of our content here at cleanpowerhour.com. That is on screen now. We're doing a pre-recorded interview like this one with John Horton, talking about C-Power's work to turn our built environment into a virtual power plant. Talk about VPPs. There's other ways than installing batteries. You can use the entire built environment. You've got your HVAC system. You've got just the energy inside your envelope. C-Power is leveraging that in some very interesting ways. And then, of course, we're bringing you our lives every Thursday. I did a great show with David Kraft from NEIS on small modular nuclear reactors. Most of us call them SMRs. Well, we should call them SMNRs because there is nuclear power in SMRs. And the trials and tribulations for SMNRs are many. They have the same problems that our large nuclear reactors have. So with that, I want to say thank you to the Commercial Solar Guy for being here week in and week out. I really appreciate your collaboration with the Clean Power Hour, John, and let's grow solar. Take care, everyone.